Ladies and gentlemen, for your information, this event is held by a hybrid method. So, we hope that attendees who attend offline are expected to obey health protocols by wearing masks, maintaining distance, and washing hands regularly.
Para hadirin, kami informasikan bahwa acara hari ini diselenggarakan secara hybrid. Oleh karena itu, kami harap para hadirin yang mengikuti secara luring diharap tetap mematuhi protokol kesehatan dengan memakai masker, menjaga jarak, dan mencuci tangan secara teratur. Serta partisipan yang berada di Zoom meeting diharapkan untuk mengaktifkan kamera.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, dan salam kebajikan.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. May peace be upon all of us. First of all, let's thank to the Almighty God for His guidance and mercy, so we can attend the first international conference on law and society with theme Agricultural Law Issues in Multicultural Societies in Faculty of Law, University of Jember. Before we start the session, let us introduce ourselves. I'm Reka Widyanugraha.
And I'm Andreas Fleming Sambu, will guide you as a master of ceremony today. So, without further ado, I'd like to welcome our speakers today. First, the Honorable Dr. Insinyur Musdalifah Mahmud MT as Deputy for Food and Agribusiness Coordination at the Ministry of Communication for the Economy of Republic of Indonesia.
The distinguished Dr. Iwan Taruna MOIPM as Director of University of Jember.
The distinguished Dr. Bayu Dwi Anggono SH MH as the Dean of the Faculty of Law, University of Jember.
The distinguished speakers in plenary sessions, Associate Professor Dr. Jamie Vision from National University of Singapore, Igede Widyana Suarda PhD from University of Jember, Dr. Febi Dwi Ramadi from Griffith University Australia, and Igam Wardana PhD from Max Planck Institute for Comparative Public Law and International Law, Germany.
And also distinguished lecturers, presenters, all participants, all committee, and attendants.
Recording in progress.
Ladies and gentlemen, starting the first session, let us deliver some structure of today's program. First, singing Indonesia's national anthem and hymn University of Jember. Second, opening ceremony and welcoming remarks. Third, keynote speech from Dr. Insinyur Musdalifah Mahmud MT as the Deputy for Food and Agribusiness Coordination at the Ministry of Communication for the Economy of Republic of Indonesia. Fourth, plenary and panel session 1. Fifth, break. Sixth, plenary and panel session 2. Seventh, closing. For now, let's start the first session by singing Indonesian national anthem, Indonesia Raya. To the participant in this room, please stand up.
Kepada para hadirin yang hadir secara luring, diharapkan untuk berdiri, dan bagi para peserta yang mengikuti secara daring, harap menyesuaikan. University of Jember.
Please sit down.
Para hadirin dimohon untuk duduk kembali.
Dear audience, please welcome Dr. Bayu Dwi Anggono SH.MH as the Dean of the Faculty of Law, who will deliver a welcoming remarks. To Dr. Bayu Dwi Anggono, the time is yours.
Recording in progress.
Good morning. The Honorable Rector of the University of Jember, all Vice Dean of the Faculty of Law, University of Jember, the organizer of this conference, lecturer, staff, and distinguished guest invite speaker. Keynote speaker, Dr. Insinyur Musdalifah Mahfud MT, Deputy Food and Agribusiness, Ministry of Economy of the Republic of Indonesia. Invited speaker, Associate Professor Dr. Jamie Davidson from National University of Singapore, Associate Professor Dr. Igede Widiana Suarda, University of Jember, Associate Professor Dr. Ika Wardana, Max Planck Institute for Comparative Public Law and International Law, Germany, Associate Professor Dr. Febi Dwi Rahmadi, Griffith University, Australia. Dear distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, in this short welcoming speech, as the Dean, let me introduce the first International Conference on Law and Society, Agricultural Law Issues in Multicultural Societies. The discourse on the relationship between law and society is complex, primarily as what is in Indonesia. Its complexities encourage more academic discourse to highlight law in practice, not only in practice in court, but also in societies. Therefore, this conference will become an annual event of the UNED Faculty of Law to invite scholars worldwide to disseminate researchers and ideas from different backgrounds and jurisdictions. In this first event, the first international conference on law and society, the discussion will address agricultural issues in multicultural societies. As your information, the University of Jember is the university that focuses on the development of environmentally sound science, technology, and art, business, and industrial agriculture. While, on the other hand, East Java Eastern region, which encompasses Jember, Banyuwangi, Situbondo, and Bondowoso, is part of multicultural region. Discussing the intersection between agricultural law issue and multicultural societies portray the local problem that link to the global conversation. Then, the UNED Faculty of Law conduct this event as part of specializing program that highlight issue about industrial agriculture under the legal framework. And please note that there will be the upcoming conference on law and societies next year because it is held annually. I hope this conference will exchange new ideas and perspectives between presenter and provide more in-depth knowledge for participants. And I hope it will be an emerging platform that will reflect you and other scholars and practitioners again the fast-changing issue about agriculture law. Lastly, I hope Mr. Rector can open this event. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning.
All right, thank you for the time given to me. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good morning. Today I'm far away from campus and now I'm in public space. So just let me to, wear my mask. Yeah. All right, distinguished participants and speakers, my dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, please allow me to invite you all to be grateful to the God who has given us the health so that we can be here this morning to join and participate in the first international conference on law and society with the theme that related to agricultural law issues in multicultural societies. On behalf of the University of Jember, of course, it is a pleasure and honor to welcome you to this conference that hosted by the Faculty of Law, University of Jember, Indonesia. That will be carried out or conducted in one day, today, 20 November 2021. I got notice from the that this conference is held in celebrating the 57th anniversary of the Faculty of Law, University of Jember, and the University of Jember as well. Therefore, I'd like to deliver my deepest gratitude to organizing committee, including the Dean of Faculty of Law, Pak Dr. Bayu Dwi Anggono, due to their hard work and valuable contribution to make today a reality. And then I'd like to extend a special welcome to our keynote speaker, Dr. Insinyur Mustalifah Mahmud, who is currently doing a job as the Deputy Minister of Coordinating Ministry of Economic Affairs, the Republic of Indonesia, particularly in terms of food and agribusinesses. In addition, today we will have several distinguished speakers also from several countries who will be presenting and discussing the today conference topic. They are Associate Professor Dr. Jamie Davidson from Singapore, and then Associate Professor Dr. Igam Wardana from Max Planck Institute for Comparative Public Law and International Law. And then there will be Dr. Fabi Dwi Rahmadi from the Griffith University, Australia. And from our university, there will be Igede Vidya Shwada, PhD. To all the distinguished speakers, please accept our greeting and thanks for your coming to this event to share your knowledge and experiences. And then for our participants, I hope you all enjoy the exciting speakers to come. Dear participants, ladies and gentlemen, we know that the purpose of this conference is to provide a forum for presentation and discussion among students, researchers, lecturers, and observers, and practitioners from the university, research institution, government institution relating to the current issue. That, as mentioned by the Dean, relating to the intellectual property rights in agriculture, food security and agricultural law, law, legal function, etc. For that, I expect that all scientific people resulted and shared during this conference will aspire to be more productive in this field and also enable further improvement of our work. Moreover, I appreciate and fully support the holding of this conference because it is relevant to the university, our university mission, vision and mission that expect to be excellent university in the development of science, technology, and art with insight of environmental sustainability, business, and industrial agriculture. All right, let us just begin this conference because the organizing committee asked me to open this conference by initially saying Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I inaugurate officially this conference. I wish you a very productive conference with exciting and encouraging discussion and exchange of knowledge. Last but not the least, on behalf of the University of Jember, I'd like to sincerely apologize to there be inconveniences that occurs before, during, or after the event. May Allah Subhanahu wa Taala bless us with a good health so that making this event successful and enjoyable. Thank you. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you to the distinguished Dr. Iwan Taruna for the opening remarks. Anyway, Reika, did you know what is our agenda next in this conference?
I still don't know. What is that, Andre?
Okay, I will tell you. So, the next agenda is really exciting for all of us. So, we were gonna watch the kaleidoscope video of the Faculty of Law, University of Jember in 2021.
Wow, really? I'm so curious.
Yeah, that was gonna be so exciting. To the operators, please play the video.
Rencana Kerja tahun 2021 dengan anggaran sebesar 9.730 juta rupiah, mengusung 38 kegiatan unggulan. Kelima program tersebut yakni peningkatan mutu layanan pendidikan sebesar 2,7 miliar rupiah, peningkatan relevansi pendidikan 2,5 miliar, penelitian dan pengabdian masyarakat 460 juta rupiah, penguatan tata kelola 3,5 miliar rupiah, penguatan kerjasama 465 juta rupiah.
persatuan bangsa Indonesia.
Terus bangkit melawan pandemi COVID-19.
Tumbuh semangat pemuda Indonesia, bergotong royong, bergerak berlandaskan ilmu, amal, integritas.
That's really cool, Andre. I'm
Absolutely
amazed. I'm
great.
so amazed
Yeah,
that I'm gladly to
absolutely.
be part of this faculty, right?
Yeah, that was so great and absolutely such amazing videos for our faculty. We will say thank you to our operators for playing the video. So, the following agenda is a keynote speech from Dr. Insinyur Musdalifah Mahmud MT as the Deputy for Food and Agribusiness Coordination at the Ministry of Communication for the Economy of Republic of Indonesia. To the Honorable Dr. Musdalifah Mahmud, time is yours.
Honorable Dr. Iwan Taruna, Rector of the University of Jember, Dr. Bayudi Anggono, Dean of the Faculty of Law, University of Jember, Associate Professor Dr. Jamie Davidson, National University of Singapore, Dr. Febi Dwi Rahmadi, Griffith University, Australia, Associate Professor Dr. Igam Wardana, Max Planck Institute for Comparative Public Law and International Law, Germany, Associate Professor Dr. I. Gede Widiana Swarda, University of Jember, Indonesia, all Vice Deans of the Faculty of Law, University of Jember, organizers of this conference, lecturers, staff, and also all the distinguished guests and all participants. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan. Good morning from Jakarta. It was such an honor for me to have this opportunity to speak at this first international conference on law and society to discuss an essential issue regarding agricultural law issues in multicultural societies. Therefore, I would like to express my highest appreciation to all of you who contributed to this important conference. Ladies and gentlemen, let me begin with a brief thought about the theme of this conference. As the fourth most populous country in the world, with around 1,300 recognized group cities, ethnicities, in the 1,300 recognized group ethnicities, Indonesia is well known for its diversity and multicultural society. Moreover, agriculture plays a significant role not only in economic sector but also in social aspect of Indonesian people. According to Indonesia statistic, there are 3.8 million hectares of agricultural areas, and 29.5% of the national workforce are working in the agriculture sector. However, the smallholder farmer who owns less than 0.5 hectares has become the backbone of Indonesia's agriculture supply chain. Despite its potential on the national economy, the regulatory aspect of agriculture, particularly agricultural land and farmer institution, needs to be strengthened to ensure the food system is working properly for more than 270 million people of Indonesia. Therefore, agricultural law issues in multicultural societies is a critical subject to discuss in this event. This discussion encouraged academic forum to highlight to what extent Indonesia's law and society issues that add increasing importance can be addressed in social, legal, and empirical approach. I read several interesting conference material, such as criminal law issues in agriculture, environmental law and agriculture, agricultural land conversion and food regulation, consumer protection and food safety in agriculture, investment law and agriculture, intellectual property rights in agriculture, also legal culture of agriculture society. While those elements, agricultural issues are discussed along with multicultural societies, it is undeniable that Indonesia is complex. It is challenging to highlight a more substantial academic discourse so that from this conference, I expect it will provide more input for lawmakers to improve Indonesia's current rules. Ladies and gentlemen, agriculture sector that contribute greatly to the Indonesia economy. This sector has shown high resilience amid the pressures of the COVID-19 pandemic, as evidenced by a consistently positive economic growth of the agriculture sector in Q3 2021, where the agriculture sector grew by 1.35% year-on-year. The government committed to encourage better development for agricultural sector in Indonesia. Currently, there are some problems that commonly faced in the agricultural sector, such as limited land, access to production inputs, access to capital, and market access. These issues are also followed by the difficulty of fulfilling the farmers' welfare due to relatively low economic added value to the farmer level. We realize that the current obstacles in the development of the agricultural sector can no longer be solved partially, but require a more holistic and comprehensive solution by involving more stakeholders. Therefore, the government has taken the initiative to create the Omnibus Law, or commonly known as Undang-Undang Cipta Kerja, in order to encourage economic recovery and transformation, as well as to overcome various problems and challenges that lie ahead. This law is expected to provide protection and convenience for micro, small, and medium enterprises and cooperatives to be able to enter the formal sector through simplification of establishment, licensing, and also coaching. The expected impacts are to create new employment through increased investment, while still providing increased welfare and protection for workers, farmers, and also fishermen. There are some regulations in the agricultural sector which, with the Omnibus Law or Undang-Undang Cipta Kerja, namely Law number 39, 2014, concerning plantation, Law number 29 of 2000, concerning the protection of plant varieties, Law number 22 concerning sustainable agriculture cultivation, and many others laws, including Law number 13 of 2010 concerning horticulture and Law number 18 of concerning livestock and animal health. Simplification and convenience in the agriculture sector, which is accommodated in the Undang-Undang Cipta Kerja, with and contained in a government regulation, is a derivative, including ease of licensing for business on a certain scale of agricultural cultivation, simplification in the consideration of setting limits of land area for plantation business, simplification of administration for application for plant variety protection right, setting the pattern of horticulture partnership for ease of doing business, determination of the area of public grazing land can be carried out by the central government. And also simplification of import-export permit for seeds, plants, animal for ease of doing business. And also ease of access to the agricultural information system by the public and business actors. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe this conference will gain fruitful results and become an important, impactful forum. All research finding, ideas, discussion, and debates here will enrich our understanding of the multifaceted agricultural law issues in Indonesia multicultural societies. It is a pleasure to welcome all of you, and I hope you will enjoy joining and having a good discussion at this conference. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan. Have a nice conference and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smus Dalifah Mahmud. Okay, thank you so much for those speeches. Now, as our warmest greetings, we would like to show you all a welcoming dance by UKM Jantung Theater, which named Tari Genjring. To operators, please play it. Just for your information, Tari Genjring is a development of traditional Sundanese genjring dance, also known as a genjring bonyot. The name bonyot is taken from the place where his dance developed, namely Bonyot Village, Pangsor Village, Pagaden District, and Subang Regency. It has functioned as a welcoming dance performed by several female dancers with energetic style and attractive movement. The whole movement illustrates the enthusiasm for the arrival of the great guest.
we would like to say thank you to UKM Jantung Theater for the welcoming dance. Moving to the next session, we are going to have a plenary session 1. In this first plenary session, our speakers will deliver their papers. First is from Associate Professor Dr. Jamie Davidson from the National University of Singapore. Second is from Igede Widiana Suwarda PhD from University of Jember, Indonesia. This plenary session will be conducted by our moderator, the Honorable Carmeli Clara Martin, as a student of the Faculty of Law, University of Jember. To the Honorable Carmeli Clara Martin, the time is yours.
Test, am I audible? Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning all, how are you today? I hope everyone is healthy and in the best condition. For fellow students, please note that participating in international conference like this can improve English speaking skills as well as get updates and knowledge related to the latest international conference. There are many benefits that can be obtained from participating in international conference like this. I look forward to meeting you at the next international conference. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Carmela Clara Martin. I am the moderator of Plenary Session 1. I am very happy to see you here and welcome all of you to this first plenary session. This conference is about agricultural law issues in multicultural societies. This first plenary session, we present you two remarkable speakers, Dr. Jamie Davidson and Mr. Igede Widiana Suwarda, PhD. First, Dr. Jamie Davidson is an associate professor at National University of Singapore. He is the assistant professor in the Political Science Department. Obtained a Bachelor of Law degree at the University of Pennsylvania and took master's degree at SOAS, Study of Asia, Africa, and the Middle East, at University of London. Continuing his education, he pursued his PhD in political science on Indonesia at the University of Washington. In line with his education, his current research is a project that compares rice policy and its politics in Indonesia, the Philippines, and Malaysia. He has also published self-authored books such as First, Indonesia, 20 Years of Democracy, published by Cambridge University Press at 2018. Second, Indonesia, Changing Political Economy, Governing the Roads, published by Cambridge University Press on 2015. And third, From Rebellion to Riots, Collective Violence on Indonesia, Borneo, published by University of Wisconsin Press at 2008. In addition, he has also published many journals, and his 5 most recent journals are: first, Opposition to Privatized Infrastructure in Indonesia; Second, rice import and electoral proximity, the Philippines and Indonesia compared. Third, then and now campaigns to achieve rice self-sufficiency in Indonesia. Fourth, stagnating yields, unyielding profits, the political economy of Malaysia's rice sector. And fifth, Indonesia new government institution accounting for their varied performance. Not only that, Dr. Jamie Davidson has also received many awards. Some of them are John Land Award for past paper presented on Malaysia, Singapore, or Brunei at 2016 by Association of Asian Studies Annual Conference on 2017. Second, book grant scheme by FASS, Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences at NUS on 2014 and 2017. And furthermore, by the same institution, he obtained Research Award Tier 1 on 2009 and again on 2014. And for your record, Dr. Jamie Davidson got a total 1,485 citation on Google Scholar as of early September on 2021. Moving on to our second speaker of the day, Mr. Igede Widiana Swarda, PhD, may come. Mr. Igede Widiana Swarda, PhD, is a senior lecturer and Vice Dean 1 at the University of Jember. He obtained bachelor degree at the Udayana University and then took a master's degree from Diponegoro University and his PhD at Queensland's University of Technology. He has also published self-authored books such as First, Pornography in the Printed Mass Media, Law Enforcement's Efforts and Its Barrier. Second, International Criminal Law, An Introduction, at 2012, published by Citra Adia Bhakti Bandung. Third, Criminal Law, Material for Eradication, Mitigation and Waiting for Criminal Crime, on 2011, published by Banyu Media Malang. He has also done many researches, and his five most recent researches are: first, prosecuting illicit cigarette trade in Indonesia, trends and observation from recent court decision on 2019. Second, implementation of de-radicalization program in prisons. Third, literature review of Indonesia de-radicalization program. Fourth, criminal law policy on cybercrime related to IT development. Fifth, protection of victims of economic crime. And the focus of his research and expertise is in the areas of terrorism, counterterrorism, anti-terrorism, radicalization, de-radicalization, criminal law, criminology, criminal justice system, and also criminal procedural law. Not only that, he has also published many journals, and his five most recent journals are Challenges of Implementing De-Radicalization Program for Terrorist Prisoner. Second, a literature review on Indonesia de-radicalization program. Third, criminalization on law number 24 of 2007. Fourth, re-evaluation of formulation policies on legislative elections crime in law number 10 of 2008. Fifth, the existence of Balinese customary crimes in Denpasar City. So, before the presentation starts, let me tell you how the presentations will go. First, Dr. Jamie Davidson will be invited to present the material. Then, Mr. Igede Widiana Swarda, PhD, will be invited to present his materials as our second speakers. After that, there will be a question and answer sessions. Now allow me to welcome our first speaker, Associate Professor Dr. Jamie Davidson from National University of Singapore, to make his presentation.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. Thank you very much for the very kind introduction. I want to thank the organizers for inviting me to this very special and interesting conference. And I want to pay my respects to all the distinguished organizers and presenters and speakers of this very important conference. I will share my PowerPoint slides. So the title of my talk is A History of Indonesian Food Security, a Rice Retrospective. In this presentation, I argue that comparisons between the success of Suharto's Green Revolution rice production campaign in the early 1980s and the struggles of today's democratic governments to achieve self-sufficiency in rice are disingenuous. They fail to take into account changed structural, economic, and political context. Once these contexts are considered, Indonesia's performance in the rice sector should be evaluated more positively than it typically has been. While Suharto's attainment of rice self-sufficiency serves as the baseline for comparisons with today's rice production programs, famously, Suharto was recognized for the feat in 1985 by the Food and Agricultural Organization. I will show how this comparison is not as straightforward as it appears. A chief development outcome of the new order was its orchestration of a structural transformation of the country's economy, shifting it from being predominantly based on agricultural activities to one fueled by industrial development. Given the high rates of growth achieved under the new order, on average 7% a year, and the consequent rapid growth in income and urbanization, one might question why rice remains a politicized commodity in Indonesia and why fervent anti-import sentiments persist. One answer lies in an agrarian form of economic populism rooted in Java that has figured in the country's ideology. Its power emanates from the anti-colonial movement that gained irreversible momentum in the 1920s. It coalesced through the combustive combination of anti-Dutch, anti-capitalist, and anti-ethnic Chinese feelings. Sukarno epitomized attempts at unification of the movement's components. Through this, he championed a people's economic democracy. His economic philosophy, known as Maharenism, inspired by his probably imaginative meeting with a Javanese peasant, propagated support for the rice cultivating peasant in an agrarian economy and society. The influence of this ideology can be seen in Indonesia's well-known Economic Democracy Clause, Article 33, Section 33, 33, Section 3, Subsection 3, inserted into the country's 1945 Constitution. It mandates that the exploitation of the country's resources must contribute to the prosperity of the greatest number of Indonesians possible. The agrarian question has also resonated loudly in the national consciousness. Java is the demographic and political epicenter of the archipelago and hosted the heaviest revolutionary violence against the Dutch. It was also home to the agrarian radicalism of the 1950s and the 1960s that precipitated the anti-communist massacres through which Suharto and his New Order regime came to power. In the aftermath of these killings, orchestrated by Suharto's army and militias, the general understood poverty and food insecurity as the root causes of the radicalism. These informed his support for the Green Revolution, but Suharto's motivations extended beyond material considerations. As a self-styled father of development or Bapak Pembangunan, he cultivated an image of himself as the chief patron of the Javanese peasantry. Suharto paradoxically helped carry forward the legacy of Sukarno's Maharenism from the colonial and post-revolutionary eras into the late 20th century of a more prosperous urban and capitalist Indonesia. Other immediate reasons why economic nationalism in the defense of the rice grower and in opposition to rice imports reverberates in post-authoritarian Indonesia include the role played by successive crises, notably the 1997-98 Asian financial crisis, Krismon, and the harsh conditionality measures imposed by the IMF, to which Suharto's cash-strapped government agreed in exchange for billions of dollars in loans to rescue the crumbling economy. Pushing economic liberalism, the IMF sought to rid Indonesia of what it saw as cronyistic and protectionist style of economic governance, characteristic of Suharto's rule. In agriculture, the IMF took aim at the import monopoly held by Bulag. The issuing of such licenses to Suharto's cronies had been a key source of graft and rent seeking under the new order. The forced liberalization of the rice trade without proper institutional safeguards or regulatory frameworks was disastrous, with Indonesia importing records amount of rice in 1998 and 1999. This experience continues to haunt many Indonesian policymakers, convincing them of the need to avoid rice liberalization at all costs. The 2008 regional rice crisis and today's COVID pandemic has reinforced the distrust of the market. The Green Revolution in Indonesia, a brief recap. Basic statistics confirm the production success of the New Order-led program. Paddy production grew from 18 million tons in 1969 to 38 million in 1984, an increase of 112%. Yield growth rose from 2.5 tons per hectare to 4.1, or a 64% rise. A key factor behind this production spurt was the enormous growth in the use of chemical fertilizers. In 1970, rice farmers on Java used 101 kilograms per hectare on average. By 1985, their use had increased by more than threefold. Specific policy interventions also played their part. For example, Suharto's government defended a floor price to induce cultivators to grow more paddy. The new order also deployed state expenditures to defend a ceiling price to protect potentially restive urban consumers. In all, the regime's policies combined to create a reliable framework for stabilizing prices, which allowed the rich and poor alike to plan and invest appropriately, regardless of whether domestic prices were above international market prices. Indonesia's Green Revolution success led to one of the largest mass poverty reductions of the 20th century. Today's structural challenges. Today, there is no second green revolution on the horizon. Such research and development centers as the International Rice and Research Institute, or IRI, based in the Philippines, are foregoing research on productive wet rice seed varietals. Instead, they are focusing on developing seeds that can better survive droughts and floods, or thrive in harsh upland environments that lack modern irrigation. Efforts are also being made to develop genetically modified, nutritionally enhanced seeds, known as golden rice, to enhance the nutritional deficiencies found in white rice. Indonesia also faces democratic and dietary challenges. Self-sufficiency proponents miss the obvious fact that obtaining rice self-sufficiency was easier when there were fewer Indonesians. In 1984, the population was 159 million. 30 years later, 254. Indonesia achieved self-sufficiency by cultivating less than half of what it produced in unmilled rice in 2014. That more Indonesians eat rice today is a consequence of population growth and an enduring legacy of the New Order's Green Revolution. Meanwhile, the rate of land conversion from agriculture on Java has been unprecedented. Urbanization is often to blame, but suburbanization poses a greater threat. The building of highways enables industrial and housing estates to be built further from urban centers, which in turn accelerates land conversion. Over the past decade, the weak regulation of land use has led to an estimated 1.7 million hectares of agricultural land on Java and Bali to be converted to non-agricultural uses. Economic challenges. During the early New Order, Western allies bankrolled Suharto's anti-communist government by underwriting generous aid packages. The economic importance of aid was then surpassed by oil and gas tax receipts as a result of the 1970s oil booms. These oil price hikes fueled rapid growth. Multifold increases in the country's development budgets reflected such an economic expansion. They soared from 5,700 billion rupiah in 1972 to 14,000 billion rupiah in 1980. The burgeoning fiscal capacity was used to subsidize inorganic fertilizers used by the country's rice farmers. From 32 billion in 1977, subsidies ballooned to over 730 billion by 1984. Today's fiscal situation is promising. There are no more windfall oil boom receipts since the country has become a net importer of oil in 2003. Nor does Indonesia today enjoy heaps of Cold War aid pumping through its economy. In late 2014, President Jokowi slashed trillions of rupiah from fuel subsidies that were acting as a drag on Indonesia's economic growth. A large portion of those savings has been redirected into badly needed infrastructure improvement, much of it beyond the agricultural sector, including the construction of toll roads, harbors, airports, and electric power stations. In short, the country's current economic priorities are simply more complex than they were in the early 1980s. Indonesia's days of financial prolificacy in the pursuit of rice self-sufficiency at all costs are a thing of the past. Political challenges. The international dimension. In the context of the Cold War, Western powers hoped that voluminous lending combined with judicious spending would stabilize Suharto's insipid anti-communist regime, as well as boost its legitimacy. Key to the geopolitical project was enhancing food security. Food insecurity was deemed to have contributed to the radicalization and instability of Sukarno's government. While the high-yielding seed varietals were produced by IRI, the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, coordinated Green Revolution projects in Indonesia. Besides USAID, the Ford Foundation, the ADB, and regime allies such as Germany, Japan, the Netherlands, and Australia were involved also. Today, the IFIs have pivoted on the matter. They no longer see the domestic production of rice as the appropriate means to achieve food security in Indonesia. They view food security through primarily a market-based lens. That the global north favors trade liberalization while protecting their own home markets has made agricultural trade policy arguably the most contentious issue at WTO negotiations. The IFIs see self-sufficiency campaigns as an excuse to maintain protectionist barriers and as a waste of scarce public resources. They prefer rice deficit countries like Indonesia to defer to the comparative advantage of the traditional rice exporters of mainland Southeast Asia, characterized by their wide river deltas, favorable rice to land people ratios, and low domestic production costs. As such, rice importers should purchase cheaper foreign rice in higher qualities. Rice growing yet rice deficient countries like Indonesia retort that they cannot trust the international market because of its price volatility. Volatility is a result of this market's thinness. Only 10% or so of all rice produced is traded internationally. The international financial institutions respond that if such large countries like Indonesia import more, then this will thicken the market and dampen volatility. The research and policy recommendations of foreign organizations has been received harshly by Indonesia's policymakers and officials. Findings by the likes of the World Bank and the OECD have stressed the detrimental effects that protectionism has had on the income of tens of millions of urban poor and small-scale farmers as a result of high domestic rice prices. The poor spend about 1/3 of their income on food. In 2017, according to the FAO, rice in Indonesia was on average selling for 80 US cents per kilogram, compared to 40 cents in Thailand and 30 cents in Vietnam. Indonesian commentators and officials have lambasted these findings for their shallow understanding of Indonesia's domestic situation. For example, they noted how higher prices provided inducements to farmers who generated record harvests that allowed Indonesia to avoid rice shortages during the 2008 regional rice scare. They also underlined the hypocrisy of Western powers imposing agricultural trade liberalization on Indonesia without the reciprocal opening up of their own home markets. In the 1970s and 80s, the international community wanted Indonesia to achieve rice self-sufficiency. Today, it does not. Political challenges, domestic. With a tight grip on political power, Suharto was not pressured by re-election imperatives. He enjoyed long time horizons that facilitated long-term planning and enabled him to recover from missteps and mistakes in ways that today's leadership cannot. The latter are under more pressure to produce immediate results. Consider this hypothetical. If Jokowi's administration had imported record amounts of rice in consecutive years, as Suharto did in the 1970s and again in the mid-1990s, his re-election chances would have plummeted. It would have amounted to political suicide. Today's leadership has to contend with a more plural and open political environment than Suharto did. Suharto was unencumbered by resistance or political opposition. The former general created a centralized system not only for the distribution of rents, but also for policy formation at the national level and for its implementation on the ground. Today, presidents grapple with more fractious administrations across ministries and across government units. By design, the Indonesian presidency was weakened under democratization to forestall future dictatorship and to create a system of checks and balances. An emboldened parliament has been a key part of this change in governance. In 2011, for example, parliamentarians threatened to block President Yudhoyono's budget proposal, specifically allocations for Bulog, until rice imports were stopped. Such actions were unheard of under Suharto. A second arena of increased plurality and power diffusion in democratic Indonesia involves changing national local government relations. A post-Suharto program of decentralization has evolved genuine fiscal, administrative, and political power to local governments. One result has been the empowerment of district governments at the kabupaten level to raise local revenue for development. Yet this imperative threatens rice production, since paddy lands produce lower returns on capital investment than housing or industrial estates or other commercial establishments. This dilemma has public policy and private interest implications. The small amount of taxes raised from rice farming is insufficient to fill local budget gaps for development purposes, such as building new market centers or paying for routine expenditures, such as the salaries of thousands of civil servants, pegawai negeri. As for private interests, with the introduction of elections of district executives like gubernur, bupati, winners are compelled to repay major campaign donors. Repayment methods involve distributing licenses to more lucrative construction projects than paddy fields can generate. Finally, the proliferation of farmer groups, an outcome of the freedom of Indonesia's democracy, has complicated rice policy. The empowerment of such groups should bolster Indonesia's drive for self-sufficiency, but sometimes central government objectives and those of these organizations can clash. In their advocacy for land reform, many farmer groups want millions of hectares of unused state land to be redistributed to landless or other land-poor farmers. Some officials, however, question whether redistributing land to poor farmers is an effective means to achieve rice self-sufficiency. They contend that larger farmers, whom they believe to be more productive, should be the beneficiaries of special government assistance. Of course, these farmers are also the main beneficiaries of the country's high rice prices. Similarly, not all farmer advocates embrace the central government's obsessive focus on rice production. What about the millions of poor non-rice agriculturalists, they query, who frustratingly receive less government assistance? Given the gravity of these aforementioned obstacles, it might come as a surprise to learn that from 2004 to 2014, unmilled rice production under a democratic Indonesia rose 2.4% on an annual basis, higher than the 2% achieved during the last decade of Suharto's authoritarian rule. Conclusions. Supporters of rice self-sufficiency celebrate Suharto's past production success, albeit selectively. They underplay the great expense of the program, which benefited from generous foreign aid that today is unavailable. The international community no longer supports rice self-sufficiency as it once did. Many other structural challenges, like the lack of seed varietal technological breakthroughs, the country's rapid urbanization and population growth, and now decentralization have emerged. Comparisons across eras need to be made judiciously, adjusting for changes in context. Democratic Indonesia could more assertively trumpet its successes in the face of the severe constraints laid out in this presentation. From the short-term time horizons of democratically elected officials and tight fiscal space, to central and local government policy discord and international pressures to ditch rice production schemes. This public relations campaign could counter the negativity that pervades most assessments of the rice sector. Indonesia imports rice on a per capita basis far less than it did during most years of the new order. The country also, on average, imports a much lower percentage of its domestic requirements than such neighboring countries as the Philippines and Malaysia. Lastly, Indonesian rice policy is not solely at the mercy of short-term material interests of the protectionists, as market liberals seem to imply frustratingly. Ironically, as Indonesians become wealthier and more urban, the politicization of rice is not waning or decreasing, but it's on the rise. Indonesia's nationalist past powerfully retains its hegemonic grip over today's rice sector, and this mighty historical force is not as amenable to change as key policy reforms are. The lifting of a monopoly on rice imports can be accomplished with the stroke of a presidential pen. An ideology born out of the country's national past cannot be so easily undone. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jamie Davidson, for giving such an informative and interesting presentation. I'm sure many of the participants at this conference can't wait to ask their question. But before that, we have another great speaker that I'm sure we've all been waiting for. Now, let me invite our second speaker, Mr. Igede Widiana Suwarda, PhD from University of Jember, to make his presentation.
Thank you very much to the moderator. Once again, thank you very much to the moderator.
Yes, you're welcome, sir.
Yes, this is a very nice introduction by the moderator, Mbak Carmel. And I welcome everybody to today's International Conference on Law and Society, which hosted by the Faculty of Law, University of Jember, Indonesia. As mentioned by the Dean of Law Faculty, this academic conference will be hosted and conducted annually by the Faculty of Law, University of Jember. It is a great honor for me to be part of this international conference, and I do hope that we can make this conference annually hosted by the Faculty of Law, University of Jember. I will be showing with you a situation of illicit trade in tobacco product based on Indonesian court decisions. Does anyone can help me to show my slide? Okay, thanks. The work that I'm gonna present today is pretty much a team effort work from my research agenda focused on illicit cigarette trade. So I would like to thank my colleague for his contribution to this research and its result. Next to, okay, this is my introduction. I would like to begin my presentation by showing that tobacco is growing in 15 provinces in Indonesia, based on the data from the Ministry of Agriculture in 2017. This is quite popular in Indonesia, where the farmers growing tobacco in 15 provinces in Indonesia. For the local Indonesian farmers, growing tobacco is one of the valuable options, since its selling price is relatively better than that other crops, such as corn or beans, which is mainly then supplied for tobacco companies operated in Indonesia. While the number of tobacco companies has felt currently, there are a few numbers. The big one is here in Indonesia as well. The number of cigarette production has risen, which then place Indonesia as the 5th largest producer, as well as the 5th largest consumer of cigarettes worldwide. So this is a big number to the Indonesia, because the 5th largest producer and then the 5th largest consumer of cigarettes worldwide. At the global level, however, the production of tobacco products is declining, as you may know as well, because of the global tobacco control movement initiated by the World Health Organization, WHO, where recognizing public health issues and problems of non-communicable disease caused by smoking habit, then member states of the WHO signed the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, or we call it FCTC. We normally call it FCTC, and then signed in 2003, and then it entered into force in 2005. Next. Next slide, please. Yeah. And then what about the situation in Indonesia regarding the FCTC or FCTC accession? I would say that I do agree with Ruzer, who mentioned that FCTC accession remains a contested issue in Indonesia. On the one hand, anti-tobacco movement gains a huge support from civil society, especially by the NGOs and health professional organizations, which try to push the government to access the FCTC. Absolutely. And then the need to access the FCTC is also supported by the Ministry of Health, according to Russell. I do agree with this. And then on the other hand, tobacco farmers and tobacco companies disagree with the accession of the FCTC, because tobacco farmers' capital will be affected indeed. And then the profit of the companies will be declining indeed as well. And maybe in some reason, the revenue of the government will be affected as well. And then what happened in the current situation, the fact shows that while the FCTC has not been accessed, the Indonesian authorities has issued laws and regulation that contain tobacco control policy, or we call it TCPs, tobacco control policies. It was adopted and implemented by the Indonesian government. And now we have a look about unintended consequences of TCPs. We must observe this. The introduction of TCPs has been consistently associated with the emerging of some negative impacts. The existing literature shows that the implementation of TCPs can be the cause of unintended consequences that usually connotes negative impacts. I did some literature review here, as you can see from my slide. Although, unintended consequences might be beneficial, but people immediately imagine that unintended consequences are not a happy surprise. This must be understood, that It's not always a happy surprise. While it is used mostly in the field of healthcare, I adopt this from the healthcare discipline. The terminology of unintended consequences is also commonly used in the field of criminology. Morgan and Clark, for example, pointed out that opportunities for crime might be created from issuing new laws, such as issuing of drugs prohibition laws can lead to other new criminal deviant behaviors. And then what happened? Next slide. The correlation between TCPs and illicit cigarette trade. You know, one of the unintended consequences caused by TCPs is illicit trade in tobacco products, or we can say illicit cigarette trade. It's sometimes used interchangeably, these two terms. This illicit trade is correlated particularly with the stricter cigarette tax as part of the TCPs instead of other aspects of TCPs such as tobacco advertising, promotion, a sponsorship ban, graphic health warning, and smoke-free areas. We now realize that we cannot, watch the advertisement in the television before 9 p.m., for example. This is part of TCP's policy implemented in Indonesia. In relation to this, BED argues that cigarette taxes significantly affect the market for illicit whites. Illicit tobacco trade is a global phenomenon which has a long history and began to receive academic attention. Yet this crime is poorly understood criminal activity because studies on illicit tobacco trade are underdeveloped and tend to focus on specific contexts such as Western Europe and the United States. So I conduct as well a bit literature review here, and I found that research on illicit tobacco market in some other contexts, such as in Greece and Sweden, is lacking. And I also found that in Indonesia, it shows the same reservations. The situation is the same. There are not much research have been conducted by the Indonesian scholars, so this is a big gap here. So as a scholar, we have plenty of issues here to be researched in the future. And next to the slide. I want to say in the Indonesian context, the increase of cigarette excise tax, especially cigarette excise tax, and the presence of complex excise tax system in Indonesia has been reported to produce some negative impacts. I quote Ahsan et al. And also Barba and Ahsan in 2014 and 2009. He said that instead of decreasing the consumption of tobacco product, Indonesia excise tax system on tobacco products may fuel illicit cigarette trade through tax evasion. Just one part, through tax evasion. And then we investigate the implementation of Indonesia excise laws through the Indonesian Court decision on excise cigarette tax offenses, which is based on Indonesia excise laws 1997 and 2003. These laws are used to prosecute the illicit trade in cigarettes in Indonesia, used by the prosecutors, by the police officers, and by the ministry, and also, of course, by the judge. This study then analyzed 37 Indonesian court decisions on the cases of illicit cigarette trade between 2010 and 2019. Next slide. Yes. This is my finding one, trend in conviction. What we can say about the trends in conviction, I try to overview my findings one about the trends in conviction. From the total of 37 illicit cigarette trade cases that have been prosecuted by the Indonesian courts between 2010 and 2019, the convictions were quite steady, with a total number from 1 to 6 court decisions annually it means that the conviction rate is around 4 convictions each year. It is based on my data from the 37 court decisions. And then according to the Directorate General of Customs and Excise, the GCE, the Ministry of Finance, the total number of investigation on illicit trade excisable goods in 2018 alone was 118 cases. But that includes both illicit trade in cigarette and alcohol as well. It's not just illicit trade in cigarette, but also in alcohol. Since the exact number among those type of trade has not been provided, the number of convicted cases found in this study cannot be compared straightforward with the number of investigation conducted by the DCGE in 2018. However, if the number is assumed that the half of them is illicit trade in cigarette, the comparison between the conviction rate and the investigation number in 2018 indicates that there is a wide discrepancy. So wide. This finding, while preliminary, suggests that further studies are needed in the area of enforcement, absolutely, such as challenges faced by the DGCE in gathering evidence and challenges faced by the prosecutor in charging the offenders of illicit tobacco trade. So we can move to other issues maybe in the future to find out what is the problem going on the practical level. Next slide. This is my finding too, utilization of Indonesia excise law. Regarding to the types of illicit cigarette trade in the context of Indonesia, as I mentioned previously, illicit tobacco trade has been criminalized through the introduction of Indonesia Excise Law number 11, 1995, and its amendment, Law number 39 of 2007. Based on these laws, a number of illicit trades in terms of excise tax offenses is subject to be brought to criminal justice that the sentence involves, imprisonments, the payment of fines, and then maybe both, depending on the offense they committed, and then depending on the judge's decision as well. Related to illicit trade in cigarettes, specifically, there are a total of 7 criminal acts that could be imposed criminal sanction as, I tried to summarize in the table, And then the implementation of Indonesia excise law through the Indonesian court decision shows that, not all those offenses have been prosecuted and convicted. I mean, from 37 court decisions that I have been researched, not all 7 of these criminal acts have been imposed by the court in Indonesia. And then from the 7 of offenses, I found that only 5 that have been prosecuted and convicted. As you can see from the bar chart, there's the number. As I found in court decision from 2010 and 2019, the bar chart provides that the number of conviction by the types of illicit cigarette trade as stated on Indonesian excise laws. It should be noted that there were more than 37 in total resulted in this analysis due to the fact that the defendant could be charged with more than one provision in some decisions. The highest number, it's quite interesting, the data that I was found. The highest number of offenses are trading cigarette without an excise stamp. Related to Article 54, with a total number of 22 convictions, followed by producing of or trading fake excise stamps. And then trading or using used excise stamps also came up, with a total of 8 convictions. And furthermore, the conviction on illegal trading of excise stamps related to Article 58, and then trading cigarettes originated from a crime, Article 56, and running unlicensed cigarettes company, Article 50, have a total number of 4, 3, and 1 respectively. The most striking result to emerge from the data is the significant number of cases on cigarettes without excise stamps, 22 cases. This result is then consistent with those of other studies and suggests that in 2018, cigarettes without excise stamps has been dominated the illicit cigarette trade in Indonesia, which is about 52.6% according to Ahsan in 2019. And next to finding 3, turning now to the location where the 37 offenses were committed, data indicated that Kabupaten Kudus or Kudus Regency had the highest number of cases for illicit cigarette trade in Indonesia with a total number of 11 cases, followed by Bangil and Sidoarjo, with both have a total of 5 cases. Further, and then Jepara Regency had a number of 3 cases, and the rest regencies had below than 3 cases, no more than 3 cases. In terms of province, of course, and then the data revealed that the location of illicit cigarette trade cases was mainly committed in Central Java and East Java, 2 provinces in Indonesia. There were 46% of illicit cigarette trade occurred in Central Java, and then 41% occurred in East Java, while other provinces have below than 15%, like Jakarta, Nusa Tenggara, West Sumatra, Riau, and Bangka Belitung. Yet these findings provide preliminary data on the location of illicit cigarette trade. It should be noted that this does not demonstrate the entirety of illicit activities surrounding the tobacco excise issues. Maybe I want to go to my next slide. Please, next slide. Next slide. Yes, this one. This is the comparison between the location trade of finalized court prosecution and the location of cigarette factories in Indonesia. We can see that these results indicate that there is a positive correlation between the high number of tobacco factories and the high crime rate of illicit cigarette in those 2 provinces based upon data in this study. So, the red color is the same province, East Java, and then the blue color is the same, is Central Java, where the offenses occurred, and also the factories is the same in the same provinces. And this one, the bar chart, please, next to the bar chart. Yes. And this is also, similar with previous data where the high rate of cases in Central Java and East Java also correlated with the high number of planted area of tobaccos in those of provinces. Although West Nusa Tenggara also has high number of planted areas in 2008 alone, other 12 provinces have below than 10,000 hectares planted area. So it is possible to hypothesize that illicit cigarette trade is less likely to occur in provinces where have lower size of planted tobacco area. However, further work is required to determine the correlation between the high number of illicit cigarette trade and planted area of tobacco. Maybe my last slide, the map. Can you show the map? And then, this is the distribution then. What about the distribution? This is an interesting result that I found, the distribution. An official of the DGCE claimed that the destination areas for distribution are small cities in Sulawesi, Kalimantan, and Sumatra. It was either delivered
I'm
by
sorry,
truck.
Mr. Gede,
Yeah.
remembering that the time has been
Yeah.
exit.
I need 1 more minute maybe to close
Yes.
my presentation.
Yes.
Okay. This is also evidence in Indonesian court decision where I found that the delivery of the illicit cigarette trade is not in the same province in East Java or in Central Java, but they delivered to other province like Kalimantan, Sulawesi, and Sumatra. Illicit cigarette manufactured in Central Java and East Java, indeed, but they are not solely traded for local black market in those provinces, but distributed to other provinces in Indonesia. That's all for me. Thank you very much, and back to you to Mbak Karmel, the moderator. Thank you.
Another great presentation that is certainly informative and interesting for all of us. Thank you, Mr. Igede Widyanaswara, PhD. Ladies and gentlemen, now are the time for the question and answer session. I would like to have 3 questions from the participants, but before that, I have a few notes as follows. First, for those of you who want to ask questions directly to our speakers using English, you can use the raise hand feature in the Zoom meeting. Second, for those of you who want to ask indirect question, you can write question in the column chat using both Indonesia and English. Let me repeat in Indonesia. Untuk para peserta yang ingin mengajukan pertanyaan secara langsung menggunakan bahasa Inggris, bisa menggunakan fitur raise hand di Zoom meeting ini. Sedangkan untuk para partisipan yang ingin menanyakan secara tidak langsung, bisa menuliskan pertanyaan melalui kolom chat dalam Zoom meeting, baik menggunakan bahasa Indonesia maupun bahasa Inggris. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now in the question and answer session. You are now welcome to ask questions according to the conditions that have been read. I got one question from Prativi Puspito Andini for Dr. Jimmy Davidson. The question is, over the last 2 decades, Indonesia has liberalized food law, which include liberalizing the rice aspect, suffering the future of food security in Indonesia. And over the years, Indonesia has opened more investment opportunities, which include investment in extractive industry that occupies rice farmland, and it will endanger the future of Indonesia's rice production. What's on your mind on Indonesia's future food security? Dr. Jamie Davidson, are you ready to answer the question?
Thank you very much for your question. It's a very valid and insightful question. I'm not a mind reader. I don't have a crystal globe. I cannot predict the future. Indonesia has always been this policy and the politics of food security has always had this mixture this tension between liberalization, which is pushed, as I said in my presentation, pushed heavily by international financial organizations and some segments of Indonesia's policymaking community, but a much larger pushback among Indonesia's policymakers, politicians, and populists that seem to be very resistant to liberalization. So you're always going to get this weird mix. You can find laws on the books about liberalization here, and then you can find other laws about protectionism on the other side. So your laws clash in Indonesia all the time. And what makes it worse is even that law on the books in Indonesia, as most Indonesians know, does not automatically translate to policy on the ground. Just because there's a law saying X doesn't mean that that X will be implemented on the ground. Oftentimes it gets lost in translation. It gets lost in the implementation from the president's office to the ministry, or from the ministry down to the regional government. And then what actually happens is completely different. So to say there's liberalization needs to come with a lot of qualifiers and made to be very contextual. So yeah, there seems to be, so the question is, what would liberalization's impact be on rice production and food security? And as I noted in my presentation, there are conflicting views on this. The pro-market liberals will tell you that Indonesia would be better served simply buying cheaper rice from Vietnam and from Thailand, because it would push down prices and Indonesians can enjoy more rice at a cheaper level. And then the protectionists say that Indonesia has some type of identity with agrarianism, and we need to actually protect our rice farmers. And they feel that when the price comes down because of imports, the price that the farmers will receive for their rice will also go down, which will imperil their livelihoods. So there's two sides to this debate. The bottom line is I cannot predict what will happen. It seems that it makes sense to buy cheaper rice from international sources, which will improve the livelihood of millions of Indonesians who are not rice farmers. Even small rice farmers must buy rice on the market, so they'll be benefited also. But then, of course, you have serious crises that seem to be happening once every few years, right? 2008, and now the pandemic, where these international supply chains are under threat because of a crisis situation, and people worry about the simple availability of rice, and so they support more domestic production. But you can't increase domestic production if you keep building highways and you keep building golf courses, you keep building housing estates, and you switch rice production into something like what we just heard after my talk, right, to tobacco or to other more valuable commodities, right? You can't do both. And so it is a real policy dilemma for Indonesian policymakers. And I'm not even sure that they know exactly what Indonesians themselves truly want, because I don't think there's good survey data to show that the majority of Indonesians prefer A to B. Everything seems to be vocalized through protests or through political parties or newspaper or TV reports. And what the average Indonesian really wants, if you said to them, would you prefer rice at X amount of rupiah or X less percent? And would you prefer to be Indonesian or to prefer to be foreign? And how much would you pay for cheaper rice? We don't really seem to have that data. So everyone just yells and screams, and we don't really know what the average Indonesian prefers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Timmy Davidson, for the answer. We continue to the next question from Muhammad Marsa. Have used the raise hand feature in the Zoom meeting. You may now open your mic and deliver your question.
Thank you for moderator. Can you hear my?
Yes.
Okay, I have a paradoxical question for Mr. Jamie Davidson. So, you know that food self-sufficiency will certainly sacrifice some land, especially forest clearing. In case of Indonesia, choosing forests is to be converted into agricultural land is only one option when there is no longer available land in the city area. So, but at the same time, Indonesia is experiencing massive deforestation in the name of development. In fact, the Minister for the Environment of the Republic of Indonesia, Siti Nubaya, said the massive development of the era of President Jokowi must not stop in the name of carbon emission or in the name for the deforestation. When the food self-sufficiency, we will certainly sacrifice some land, especially forest deforestation. What do you think about this phenomenon? Are policies in Indonesia still relevant to restoring our food self-sufficiency? Thank you. Back to moderator.
Thank you for your question. I don't see Indonesian rice production as a main contributor to deforestation. I think there are other factors that lead to deforestation in Indonesia, including especially palm oil expansion. So palm oil is the real contributor to deforestation. So don't forget, right, when Suharto tried to build that huge rice project in central Kalimantan, which I think has been being revived under the Jokowi, or at least it was before the pandemic. There was talk of using, draining the swamps. Again, those are swamps. They will burn, and that will lead to carbon emissions. But it's not deforestation per se. They're trying to put rice into swampy areas by draining the land. So deforestation is a massive problem in Indonesia, but I don't think it is a large contributor to rice production. Rice just doesn't generate that much revenue. If you're going to fell a forest, people want higher investment returns on their money than simply rice. I mean, rice just doesn't generate enough value to then deforest. So I share your concerns. I just don't. Rice is a culprit for other things, but for deforestation itself, Kalimantan and Sulawesi, those are oil palm plantations, or even rubber plantations. It's not. I could be wrong, but I don't think rice is a large contributor to this problem. But it is a problem, absolutely, that you identified correctly.
Thank you, Dr. Jamie. Sir Muhammad Marsha, is there any other question?
No longer question. Thank you.
Okay, so continuing to the next question is asked by the column chat via Zoom meeting from Faris Basrahil. The question is to Mr. Igede Widyanaswarda. The question is, why are there so many illegals circulating but not revealing, but the case is not disclosed, is not published to the public? Are you ready to answer? Yes.
Thank you for the question. It is about number of illicit cigarette trade in Indonesia. Actually, I don't have any specific research to come up with the number, how many the cases in Indonesia. But I do agree with Pak Bahrul, yeah, who asked the questions. The number, the exact number of the cases is not regularly, published by the government. So this is the weaknesses about how to face the issues in the context of Indonesia. What I want to say is about, the problem of TCPs, tobacco control policies. On the one hand is, I do agree, have a good idea, have a good goals to be achieved, but on the other hand, we also must think about unintended consequences, as I mentioned in my presentation. One of them is illicit cigarette trade in tobacco. And now it's a growing trend, I think, in Indonesia, where illegal market of cigarette is so high. So that's an effort by not just from the government, but also from the top companies, top cigarette companies in Indonesia also want to fight with this typical crime in Indonesia. So once again, I don't have any specific data about the number of illicit cigarette trade in Indonesia, but I do agree with you that this is a big issue. If the Indonesian government want to, cross down these issues in the context of Indonesian criminal justice system. I think that's my response. Back to you, to the moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Gede. Great enthusiasm from the participants and no less great answer from our speakers. Dear audience, finally we come to the end of this session. I would like to thank the speakers for their informative and interesting presentation and all the participants for their very active participation. The next session will be panel session that will be divided into 8 breakout rooms with 1 moderator at each room. Finally, give applause for the speakers and all of you. Back to you, Reika and Andre. Thank you.
We would like to say great thank you to Carmelie for being the moderator for the panel session 1. Moving on to the next agenda. The next agenda is the panel session 1, which going to lead by the moderator from each of the breakout room. And now, we are pleased to the moderator to assign all presenters to join the breakout room. And for the presenters who is invited, please accept the invitation or you can join manually by click on the breakout room.
Bapak Ibu presentator, diharap untuk segera memasuki undangan breakout room dari para moderator atau dapat langsung bergabung secara manual sesuai jadwal masing-masing yang telah tertera. Terima kasih.
Recording stopped.